Hello, welcome to this video. Right, we're in the Christmas week, aren't we? And I've done an epic for you for the Christmas week. I've done the 100 greatest progressive rock. No, I haven't. I did that the week before. I've done the 100 greatest jazz rock fusion albums of all time, which was a pointless exercise in me basically reading a list out over about an hour. Right, but people seem to like it and they come and watch that stuff. It always does really good, you know. As I see the views trickling down on my channel, I go, I need a top 10. No, I don't need a top 20. No, I need a top 100. Let's beat all the other guys. You know, because all the other guys, they script what they're going to say, and you don't script what you're going to say, do you? So you could do 1,000, you'll just sit there and say whatever. You might get Robert Wyatt's name wrong, you might not miss a couple of them out. It does not matter, because they're not coming here to, you know, see me read off a script. They've come in here to see whether I can keep my mouth going and talking about all this stuff that they love. They like watching that. They like watching that. So I hope I hope that I have given you this week, right? Because there hasn't been much really here on this channel. You've had a really grumpy Christmas message on Christmas Day. And it's now Friday, whatever that date is, because I haven't got a clue, because I'm not filming it on Friday. I'm obviously filming it before. But, here I am, and I've decided to do a music roundup. My Christmas message on Christmas Day was going to be a music roundup. Right, now, this is the way I see the year, right? In terms of progressive rock, okay, there's been some biggish legacy releases. This is by artists that are really, really old, basically, and link back to this sort of classic era prog, or at least back 20 or 30 years. And those have been the albums that the proggers have been talking about. The number one on the list is Peter Gabriel, and of course Peter Gabriel only makes an album every 20 years anyway now, so this has been long awaited, and it's come out. It's not really progressive rock, but he sang for Genesis, so people will go and listen to it. It seems to carry on in the sort of more 80s style. I've listened to it a little bit. I have no interest in it whatsoever, to be honest. I find it really difficult to you know, when you've got someone, how old's Peter Gabriel? 72 years old, isn't he? Because he was born in 1951. I think so. He's 72 years old. You've got to be a real fan to be interested. Well, you know, is anyone going to be interested in what I've got to say at 72? You know, will they? Maybe I'll have the hope that they will. And of course, Roger Waters has brought out the Redux Dark Side of the Moon, which seems to have been the biggest anticlimax ever, really, because first you had the announcement that he was going to redo it, which was very divisive, and some people like Roger Waters and some people don't like him because of his politics, right? And really strangely, as this album's come out and all the furor that has gone on around this album and his live shows, and we've covered it on this channel, who was to know at the end of the year, right, as we try and celebrate Christmas, we are aware of what is going on between Israel and Palestine, which is absolutely awful, absolutely awful. And so this album, which seems to be pretty lackluster, also seems to be pretty apt in a way, apt in that some people will be totally in agreement with what he says, and some people won't, and some people like me will be going between the two. You know, I look at that whole situation and go, my God, now they all seem rotten. There's no side I want to side on, and it's exactly the same with the Ukraine war, right? So here I am trying to talk about music, trying to talk about Roger Waters' Redux. Who cares with what's going on in the world at the moment? But these are events. Right, it's old artists that are liked by older people. It's people that will probably still go out and buy a CD, you know, and they can still get that little bit of money out of it. Steven Wilson, who's a little bit younger, came out with the Harmony Codex, which I thought was a great album, really, really good album, strong album. He's flirted, going deep into progressive rock, and he's flirted out there looking at sort of consumerist and popular music styles. And on this album, he seems to really have brought those two together in a really nice, finely balanced way. He's a master musician. He knows what he's doing. The idea of, he's the same age as me, so the idea of someone of that age that has that sort of postmodernist knowing view of music history, and I'm a massive fan of his podcast he does with Tim Bowness. And just so you know, I am now drumming for Tim Bowness, so Tim's a good friend as well. But it's a fantastic podcast as they bring their extreme knowledge of the sort of history of popular music in the last 50 years to bear, looking at the past and really exploring some interesting ideas about it. But that knowingness, that awareness of our sort of rock roots and the sensibilities that go with that is so un-now. That you feel that Steven Wilson is making incredible popular music for people whose idea of popular music was what we had in the 1980s when we were listening to Talk or Kate Bush albums as popular music, you know. I know this because my daughter will come in and say, "Dad, do you like this song?" And I always go, "No," because it's absolutely awful. And the pointers, the semiotic pointers in what Steven Wilson's doing and what modern pop songs are doing are pointing completely. One is so knowing and one is so unknowing. All right. I think the albums for me, the top of the list, the one that really blew me away was the Avenged Sevenfold album, Life is But a Dream. Okay. Avenged Sevenfold, you know, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, represented everything I didn't like about modern metal. And I feel a little bit guilty about not giving that band a little bit more time when I listen to it and just getting put off by the sort of modern metal production methods and all that type of thing. This album is not a metal album, it's a progressive rock album. It's a true progressive rock album, right? I don't mean that it's weird and so we can call it progressive rock. It is a progressive rock album. It does all the cliches that you expect from 70s progressive rock, but it does it in a way which is absolutely interesting. It tells a story, it takes you to a certain place, but it does it in a way that I've never really heard before. My respect for that band has gone through the roof. An incredible bunch of musicians, composers and visionaries. I was absolutely blown away by that album, and I love the fact that they're taking a risk. They're pushing they're pushing the envelope there. So that was one of my favourite. I think that was my favourite album of 2023. Bubbling under that would be Noah's album, Noah Forever. Fantastic album. I'm a huge fan of Noah. I'm a huge fan of Lewis Cole. I see them as a jazz rock fusion band. And those who say, yeah, but there's not that much soloing, it's more pop music. When you look at popular music, there's a certain area of popular music where the esoteric heart is progressive rock, and nobody wants to admit that. Okay, so when you look at 1980s popular music, right, and this is the Steven Wilson thing, I think. This is a guy that grew up as a child, he's the same age as me, grew up in a child in the 1970s, so he would have been listening to all that stuff that came out, which was very divisive. You know, you got the Stranglers and the Damned, but you've also got War of the Worlds by Jeff Wayne coming out, you've got Sky, you've got all this going on at the same time as you sort of come to fruition, and people don't realise this. You have some of the biggest progressive rock albums in history coming out post-punk, right? Everyone thinks that punk came and knocked it out all the way, but my early memories of music, which would be Steve Wilson's the same thing, would be Frightened at the Wall, would have been watching Talking Heads once in a lifetime, would have been watching Devo, would have been listening to War of the Worlds by Jeff Wayne or Variations by Andrew Lloyd Webber. And what is interesting as we hit the 1980s, 1980s pop music is not post-punk music, it's progressive rock drawn in by punk. Punk comes along for just a few months and then draws that in, it pulls that in. And so there are these great conceptual statements going on without a lot of the sort of fannying around, you know. And there's so many different bands that take progressive rock and use it in so many different ways. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, for example, would be one example of that. And Kate Bush is a completely different example of that. The Police, a completely different example of that. ABC is a completely different example of that. Nick Kershaw. There's all these different takes, but this is highly sophisticated music. And that's a very English pop music thing, a very British pop music thing, drawing on progressive rock. Over in the States, we see the emergence of the Princes, we see the emergence of the Stevie Wonders and the Madonnas and all these people that come out in the 1980s. And if you look, that is really drawing upon the sort of approaches that have come out of jazz rock, okay? And so this lineage that you see, that doesn't really exist anymore, right? Our age group are aware of it. There is a knowingness with our age group, which I think is almost like unfashionable. So going back to Noah, what I really enjoy about Noah is this is really informed by modern popular music techniques, also going back to like house music, techno, and drum and bass jungle and all that type of stuff. And it's rather than what happened actually with those music forms in the 90s, where it got so sophisticated they moved towards jazz. Noah the opposite. It's like they're creating popular music that is sort of postmodernistically referential to the past, but in a way that's very, very cool. I mean, these are relatively young people making this music, but in that are moments of almost like a new sound in jazz rock for me. Really informed by quantization, you know, really informed about being on the grid. It's incredibly on the grid, even though they're not. There's a virtuosity there. A lot of the solos are very dazzling, but they do not leave the. It's all like that all the time. It's like a computer game. And I find that very compelling. Now, Noah, the only people who aren't going to like Noah are young people. I played it to my kids and they find it completely alien. And I've noticed that there's a lot of older people like me championing them, but it's us that likes them in the end. It's the older people who like Noah. But that was probably my second favourite album of the year. My third favourite album was, it's just come out a few weeks ago, was Himalayan 2, Volume 2 by Moon Safari. A full-on progressive rock album that goes back to the things I love about progressive rock. Harmony, beautiful melodies, beautiful playing, a conceptual framework that takes you on a journey, lots of different musical styles. And in all those music styles is a little bit of prog metal. There's a little bit in there, and I think that's phased some of the true Moon Safari fans. But in terms of to my ears, that little bit of hardness is only improved their sound. Now the thing is, for me, with the Noah album, Noah Forever, I love that band. I think that's the best album they have ever made. Right. So what we've seen with that band is 2023 has seen them finally put their stamp. They've got it right. Same with Moon Safari. Incredible albums in the past, but all with little issues, you know. They've spent 10 years making this album, but they've made now a coherent statement for me. A masterpiece. That's what Moon Safari have done. In terms of Avenged Sevenfold, what I see is a band successful enough and grown up enough to not care anymore and actually make the music they want to make. And in that, it's an incredibly bold statement, and it's almost like the opposite, because it doesn't represent what Avenged Sevenfold is anymore. It's something completely different. So those are the three albums I'm going to put forth. Now, you probably want a big list. Well, I am not listening to hundreds of albums, right? All the other albums I'm listening to, I'm usually connected to in some way, or they're my friends' albums. You know, and I've championed those on here where I can. But for me, what is more interesting is the ongoing development of this channel and sort of my greater experience of being a musician existing on YouTube. Very interesting. So I had a couple of quite obvious revelations this year in terms of YouTube. One of them was that I've got a network of stuff out there more than just me doing YouTube. I've got my Facebook and I've got other YouTubes that I do. I've got a drum YouTube that nobody watches at all. I've got a Bandcamp. Now this is the interesting thing for me is that I released an album this year. I released Radio Silence by my prog band Rain. That came out early on, I think around about February this year, and it's done all right. It's a proper album. It cost a lot of money to make, and it's out on CD and vinyl, and you can go and buy it. The fact that that exists in the real world, it makes it a certain thing. This is one of the revelations I've had about music this year, is that you have a choice to make a real thing, and it makes you realise that people do not buy. When they buy something like this, right? So I've just pulled this album out, Dvorak. Right? You never seen that one before, have you? But when people bought that, the music, the sound that comes out of this album, the sound that's in the grooves is not what you're buying. You're buying this package that can produce that, right? But it also doesn't have to produce that. I can still hold this and own it. This is the product here, the physical product. Trying to sell things that aren't physical, ephemeral ideas of nothingness. Because music's so ephemeral, we hear it all the time, right? So for a musician, they have a choice. They can go down the route of trying to create something real. Now, I'm going to show you something that one of my patrons did for me. There's that. Oh my God, it's fell on the floor. I've just done a Christmas ranty thing, and I decided to smash up. Oh, I can't bloody find it now. This has always been sat there. Where is it? Oh, I hope I haven't lost that. Now, well, this'll do. I'll grab that. Oh, there it is. I stuck it up here after all that. Right, so this is the interesting thing for me about music. I have all this stuff that I do. I make proper albums, and I see those as real albums, proper albums done properly. They have to be done in a certain way. There's a certain quality thing that you have to go through. It can, by the time the album comes out, the aesthetic ideas that you had maybe 6 months to a year before, you've completely moved beyond, and you don't really know what you were trying to do at the time, and all that type of stuff. Long-winded process. This involves all sorts of things, and that's a thing. That's a thing. It makes a product, right? I also brought out my album this year. For Bella, I've actually brought 2 albums out, and now another album I brought out in April, which I can't say the name of it. It's just like it's the chemical symbol for antidepressant. That's what it's named after, which might give you an idea about what this year's been like for me. But anyway, I brought out an album this summer called For Bella, and I think it's the best album I've ever made. In terms of these other types of albums, I have a Bandcamp. And on Bandcamp, I could make an album now and release it this afternoon. I could put the mics up and improvise an hour of drumming. I could mix that, stick it onto a file and upload it onto Bandcamp. It's a completely different thing. And one of the things I've realised is that these two things are different. When people say, oh, we're releasing an album, are you releasing an album? Are you releasing a digital-only release on Bandcamp, or are you putting your stuff out on Spotify? All these things are different to making a CD. Anyway, I made this album for Bella, and then one of my lovely patrons called Colin, he then went and made me a CD, which I haven't got here, but he made me a one-off release on cassette. Now, my intention at some point is I'm going to put these physical things, my idea is, and this is an artistic idea I've got, is to put these up on my Bandcamp, right? I don't know whether I should do this because it's an artistic thing, and I don't want people to think I'm doing it because I'm greedy, but I'm thinking of putting these up on my Bandcamp page for such a huge amount of money to buy that nobody will be able to buy them. They're really expensive. I think about 200 or 300 quid for that cassette. He's done even more esoteric. he has done a lovely mini disc version of it. Now the world really wants this, doesn't it? They would need my album that you can go and listen to for free on mini disc. And this is a release, there's only going to be that one. There's going to be that one, and for the real esoteric, the people that want to really own something that is completely rare, I suppose, he's done me an 8-track version. Look at that! It's a beauty. So next year I'm thinking of putting these up on my Bandcamp for a huge amount of money. Now if someone's idiotic to buy, brilliant, I make a ton of cash. And I love making a ton of cash. But what it will really do is prove the point that product is a certain thing. And these ephemeral things that exist on our internet, they're something else, right? Now you can have a success of doing both. The revelation that I had was firstly to add on all my videos links to all the stuff I did. And so as I did that, me sitting and talking rubbish at you pulls you in, and then those are really quick. So you might go and check some of those things. And that's happened. And I've now, after 10 years of doing my Bandcamp, I've spent 10 years making albums that went out of the mainstream, where I could do creatively whatever I wanted to do, whatever I felt like doing. That's what you get on my Bandcamp. Right, you can operate on Bandcamp like that because there's no overheads. I'm sat in my studio here, everything's stuff. I can make an album tomorrow, I can mix it myself, I can master it myself. I'm not going to pay a big studio to mix it like we do with the proper albums. I'm not going to, well, actually my mate Rob Groker, who's a fantastic engineer, masters all my stuff, and that gets me out a whole bunch of trouble because it means I don't have to worry about the mixes so much. But anyway, that's going off on a subject. But I've got to give Rob Groke, my partner in crime, some credit at the end of the year on this video. Anyway, to get back on track about what I'm talking about, my Bandcamp represents artistic freedom. The real albums that are put out when they're physical, they represent, because of the investment that has to be there has to be at least some commercial consideration, and so that makes those two different things. So my Bandcamp's a hard sell, right? It's a hard sell. There's stuff on there that is really out there. The second revelation was how now, if you are making stuff if you're making stuff that's not like this, see, there's two things going on here, right? You're either making something like this, and the reason why you buy this is because you want to own the product. So what dictates the price is the rarity of these products. Now, it could be that nobody wants these, but you never know. You make the tiny amount of visibility I have on here on YouTube make one person go, I really want to own that 8-track of Andy's album. I don't even like the album, but that's the only one in the world, and I'd love to have it as a thing to hold and look at and know that it's the only one, right? And if that's the case, I will have proved, I think at least to myself, of how that part of the music industry works, right? And as you know me, I have to question everything. This is why I'm here doing this channel, because I am really interested in the fundamental esoteric workings of music. But on the other side, I have a hard sell of a Bandcamp, and anybody who knows about, is trying to make creative music, and then they don't see themselves as mainstream. They have no real audience there, but they have the need to create. And Bandcamp is a beautiful place to host those creations. And then they sit there and go, this is wonderful, but nobody's visited and listened to it. The big revelation I had is the fact that on this medium, what I'd learned from YouTube is we start with our eyes, right? That's the revelation. That's the thing that's come out for me, is that 50 years ago, the way things were culturally, we would start with our ears. So if you wanted to get someone's attention, you went on the radio and went, and I've heard, been told so many times by people of a certain era that came to sort of they came of age in the 1950s, that they would be walking down the high street and then coming out of the shop they'd hear Jim Vincent, and it was like that whole life's changed. At that point it was the ears, that was the bait, always was the bait. It's not like that now. It's eyes. It's words. Those are the things that pull you in. All right, and I learned that from YouTube. YouTube is based upon, first off, the thumbnail. The thumbnail appears in the bottom corner. Right, if you get that thumbnail right, and I'm not saying I don't know how to get it right, and one of the things I'm still grappling with is I work in Photoshop on these thumbnails, and they're absolutely fantastic, and they're all detailed and beautiful and proggy, and then when they appear, they're tiny in the corner of the screen, and then I think, oh my God, can't even read the writing on that. And I've noticed a simpler, more striking image that pulls somebody in. That's the starting point, and then they read it, and that statement, those words, then have to grab the person, right? If you could grab them in like that, then they will switch it on and they are looking. You watch, you don't listen to a YouTube video, you watch a YouTube video. So I started this year, in between my proper videos where I talk about music, I would make these weird psychedelic little films. I see them as films. It's like the complete opposite. It's the antithesis of what I do on the channel. These videos are like me just talking to camera. There's no editing, that's it, they go bang them up. These are immensely edited, a lot of video effects, all really dirt cheap, all my level, and I'm not a filmmaker, but I had a go, and I started to put these videos out, and now people are watching those videos. I put a track out a couple of days ago, and it's a 20-minute prog fusion epic. There's no vocals on it. It's a hard sell. I looked at it about 2 days later, and 1,000 people had watched that, had watched it, right? To get 1,000 listens in 2 days on Bandcamp is incredible. And it's really surprising that people came up and they liked it, they listened to it. For many people, that's the thing, that they've got the product. They don't need to go to Bandcamp and grab it. And it's that part, those that go over to Bandcamp now and grab that stuff, yeah, they're downloading a file onto their hard drive. It's not the same as that, is it? Having a file on your hard drive, you know, how much are you going to spend for that? So you're trying to con someone in spending like £1 or £2 on a download, where really there is some worth to that, but it's the worth that you get on Spotify for a listen. It really is hardly anything. These economics have driven popular music in the 21st century, and they're driving them in a different way in the 21st century. The whole thing's changing. And so us proggers who are old, us jazz fusion fans are old, to have me here, you know, and I've tried my best to do it, to look at the musical year and pretend we're looking at it like we would have looked at it 30 years ago. It's not possible anymore. What's really interesting are the changes that are happening in music, and what interests me the most is the little nooks and crannies that will allow truly creative people to express what they do well and to be able to get something back from it. And there needs to be a bit of finance there. There needs to be a bit of money for people, because if not, well, it doesn't for everybody. If you're a very wealthy person, then there's no problem. You can pay for it all to happen. And I worry that we're just going to end up with a situation, I think we've got that now, where the creative music makers are the elites, they're the well-offs, you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those people should be allowed to say what they want and express themselves. Of course they should. But other people should be able to. And that's something I'm very aware of doing this. I'm very aware that, you know, music's being controlled now by people who own Spotify that are billionaires. These people are richer than any musician has ever become, right? You've got that at the one end, and at the other end you have what I would call progressive activists. You know, these are people with degrees, usually relatively young. They have very progressive activist utopian ideas, and they are very vocal on the internet. They believe they are morally justified in what they say without any question. You know, you feel that they see themselves as morally, you know, there's a, how would I put it, they have an objective morality about the world, which is based upon a utopian view. You know, that this is the way the world should be better, and everyone needs to follow that. If they don't follow that, they need to be in somewhat kicked out of the utopian death cult that will end up walking the earth immortal on this beautiful planet full of vegans and people who can identify whatever they want. All that idea. I'm not against any of these things. If people think I am, I'm not. But the progressive activists who have that moral compunction, right, they are the most vocal group on the internet. The rest of us aren't, but they are. And they want to control the narrative. And with that, I wonder how the creativity that's within music, how can that survive? If you can't truly challenge the orthodox, because sorry, progressive activists, you've gained control of the narrative, and it is now the orthodoxy. Right? Now, as we go into the next year, things are going to change for me, and I can't say much about it at the moment, but I will. And it's going to be an interesting journey for me, and hopefully for you, as I now try to traverse this new musical landscape. With my ideas, which I do not think are set in stone, which I think should be questioned and should be put through the mill. But my ideas of the importance of creativity to human beings, and the importance of the access to creativity to all people, especially the underprivileged. And by the underprivileged, I mean the actual underprivileged, not those that just are members of a arbitrarily assigned group, which has now been confirmed a sort of different type of privilege than existed before. Or is it the same privilege? I don't know. Privilege is a strange thing. And music, which is fundamentally elitist in its aesthetic approach, can so easily form into elitism and privilegeism, right? And those ideas are far more interesting to me than talking about Peter Gabriel's new album. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. But I hope there was enough stuff in there about this year's music scene. This video is going to be called, 2023, my opinions, or I didn't even know what's going to be called yet. I don't know. But I think I'm done now. It's Christmas week. You don't want me to go on for hours. You've had a bloody hour and a half video on Wednesday. It's Friday. We're looking towards the new year. I think I'll be doing a Philosophy Sunday video on New Year's Eve. And I'm thinking about doing a New Year's Eve talk, which would be very interesting for me, because I'm so interested in the idea of time, as you know. So I might do something like that, and I might do something that it'd be nice to try and do a countdown to because I normally put my stuff out. Well, the trouble is, you're all over the place, so there's no point me trying to coincide with the actual, change over from the 23 to 24. But I am in England, of course, and we do own time. I mean, Greenwich Mean Time is actual time. All the rest of you are just living on an aberration of good old British time here in England. Who invented time? We invented time here in England, along with everything else. And I don't like a world that can't appreciate the incredible contributions of the colonies of the colonial power that the United Kingdom is. God, you're going to get so much hate. I get comments. You go into YouTube and you could open up this little thing and it says, do you want to see these hidden comments? You go into the hidden comments and they might be a bit dodgy, but people try to sell you. And then you go to the offensive ones. It's another layer in. You open it up. There's all these people going, you're a passive racist. Well, sorry. I'm going to finish there anyway. Bloody hell. That's been a weird video. Well, that's my roundup of the year. What did you expect? Look, I'm going now. I'll see you on the next video. Like, subscribe, support me on Patreon, or if you don't want to support me on Patreon, you could give me a little Christmas donation through my YouTube PayPal tip jar. Thank you very much for watching. See you on the next one.
And so today my world is mine. Your hand in mine, we walk the mile. Thanks to you, well, it will be done, baby.